Okay.
Are we good?
Yep.
That was the light blink. Is staff all ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I will call Wilsonville City Council back to order for a work session on October 19th at 5:29 p.m. after we completed executive session, and ask the council, first of all, any items on agenda or on consent that you would like to ask about or concerns. We have 3 contract authorizations on consent for the city manager to proceed with, if that is approved. Council President Ackerval.
Thank you. I have a quick question on one of the items, I guess related to one of the items that's on consent agenda, and I'm trying to find which one is the number. Okay, I believe this is the resolution 2841. And in the council packet, it's referring to some of the, like the public outreach that would happen in conjunction with that project. And I assume at this point, those potential community meetings or whatever is all happening in a virtual format, would be my assumption. And I just thought, as we're doing that sort of thing, or projects are happening where there's the community outreach piece or a community meeting for a neighborhood that might be more affected, if it's done in a virtual environment, are we recording those meetings and then making them available to people, like making the recording available to people afterwards? Because that might actually be a helpful thing in leveraging our new virtual environment where things are online and more easily recorded or accessible at different times. I just wanted to check in and see what like kind of the current thinking was on that.
Well, I think that would be project by project specific. This one, the way I read the community involvement process is that there will be emails directed to the residents in the immediate vicinity. I don't see anything in there where they're suggesting there's going to be any kind of virtual Zoom meeting. So I think it's just going to be, here's the kind of scope and extent of the project. If you have any questions or concerns, please call this number. Am I capturing that correct, Mike? Because this is your project? Yeah. I'm getting a nod from the staff person. On a bigger project that affects, you know, a wider area, we would probably do a virtual town hall to gather input and to have a deeper conversation. I view this as kind of a smaller project that's going to impact very few people, so we wouldn't go through that robust kind of public process for a smaller project like that. We would do a door hanger or outreach to specific neighbors to let them know what we're doing, how long it's going to last, and what to do if they have any questions or concerns.
Yeah, that all makes sense, and that's kind of what I would have expected maybe for something like this, you know, thinking about the number of residences that might be more impacted than others. But I did notice on page 128 of our packet, under task 3, it says public outreach, and it describes initial neighborhood meeting and then neighborhood meeting number 2. And that's where I started kind of thinking about, I wonder what those neighborhood meetings look like, and how the kind of practices happening at the city might be changing as more and more things are online and maybe able to be shared after the fact too, you know, for people that couldn't attend a virtual community meeting at, say, 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. You know, it might be something that we could gain for people to access information. So it's related to this project, but also kind of just related to what our practices are in general and how those might be evolving as we're we're learning to work in these new mediums right now.
Yeah, no, I get your point. Your point is that it would be useful to have those archived somewhere so that if somebody wasn't able to make the meeting, we could direct them to a website where they could watch the Q&A and the dialogue. And if that didn't answer their questions, they could contact staff. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, yes,
Okay.
note to file. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Anybody else? The question from Councilor President Akkerval kind of jogs my memory a little bit and raises a question in my mind. Have we decided when and where we are going to use multilingual notifications in support of our DEI strategy at this point, or is that a whole nother discussion?
Well, it is a whole nother discussion, but I am going to, during city manager update tonight, I'm going to give you an update on where we're at with the DEI stuff and also some of the police conversations we've had about transparency and data sharing stuff. So I'm prepared to talk to you on those issues when it comes my turn at the end of the council meeting tonight.
That sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no other questions on the agenda items, any special councilor concerns at this point in time? Not seeing any. Other the world around us is all kind of shaking, so let's proceed to our regular work session items if we can, starting with our draft arts, culture, and heritage strategy, which is a longer-term project we've been on for the last couple of years here. Mr. Otnet, I think. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Nat, City Council members. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Mark Otnet, Public and Government Affairs Director for the City of Wilsonville and the Project Manager for the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Project. With us tonight is Bill Flood.
Greetings. Good evening. Greetings.
Okay, I'm going to move to screen share mode to start the presentation. Thank you for having us tonight to discuss the draft Arts, Culture, and Heritage Strategy. Tonight's City Council's review of the strategy will cover the extensive public engagement process. We'll also cover the findings and recommendations of the strategy, which are grouped under 4 categories: community context, cultural nonprofits, the public sector, and public art and cultural center. However, the arts and cultural strategy has a great deal of additional content that we do not intend to go over tonight. If you have questions, we're more than happy to provide responses. This includes Section A, the introduction, as well as Section D, which includes the results of interviews, surveys, and meetings that were conducted over the past 2-year period, particularly in the past year. Finally, we have a set of appendices that were produced in relation to the arts and cultural strategy that cover a great deal of local information as well as general information pertaining to arts, culture, and heritage. Again, these are contained in the 15 appendices that cover about 1,500 pages. We will not go over these tonight unless you have specific questions about them. So just to commence a summary on our public engagement process, the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Strategy was guided by a large task force. We had 42 members in total, which is really the largest task force in the city's history. Of our 42 members, 33 members volunteered to serve on a variety of committees. This included a steering committee, youth advisory committee, and then we had 3 specific committees that looked at the community's cultural assets. And the assets were broken into arts, heritage and history, and then humanities and literary arts as different kinds of assets that are in the Wilsonville community. Those are contained within the draft strategy, a list of those. We held a variety of public meetings. This summer, the task force met on 3 occasions for approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours each time. We also had a youth engagement meeting, a Latinx family meeting, as well as a community meeting with the Clackamas County Arts Alliance in October of 2018, roughly 2 years ago. We also conducted a variety of public surveys and comment periods. Currently, the draft Arts and Cultural Heritage Strategy is out for public comment that ends tomorrow. We also had comment opportunities on our draft findings and recommendations, and we went out for various surveys to the community at large for a cultural vision survey and our community cultural assets, as well as our consultant Bill Flood conducted a survey of 15 municipal cultural facilities and programs that we'll go into a little bit more. We had a great deal of stakeholder interviews with 51 individuals over a total of both years, 31 in 2018 and 18 interviews this year. Again, we also interviewed operators of municipal cultural facilities and programs. Now to Section B, our findings, and we'll just walk through these. And feel free, if you have any questions or comments, to go ahead and interrupt us. Finding 1, essentially, is that Wilsonville lacks a clear community core center and a collective cultural identity. These were perceptions that we gathered through both surveys and through interviews over a 2-year period of time. It appears in some ways that the town center of Wilsonville relocated 3 times over the past 170 years. This may contribute to the sense of a lack of a one downtown core. Again, these are perceptions. And finally, the city has grown a lot, particularly in the last 40 years of our 170-year history. Finding 2 is that we've had demographic changes underway that are shaping the future community. This includes great growth in the Latinx and other population groups. While the U.S. Census data shows that approximately 11 to 12% of Wilsonville is Hispanic or Latino, the Westland Wilsonville School District data shows that for our middle schools in Wilsonville, 25% of students identify as Hispanic, which is twice the community percentage. Bill, did you have a comment or?
Well, yeah, just that, so this suggests obviously that the Latinx population in Wilsonville is going to grow.
We're finding that to definitely be the case in our outreach meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, one fascinating thing I wanted to mention about our Latinx family meeting, which was a super rich meeting. One of the members who runs a business in Wilsonville, one thing they mentioned was the need for greater communication between Spanish-speaking people and the city, and the same he mentioned among Latinx people in Wilsonville. And immediately after the meeting, he started a Latinx-specific Spanish-speaking Facebook page. So he's kind of problem-solving on the spot. It's pretty cool. I think Mark's got his eye on him in terms of engaging him in other guys' ways in the city. He's a really sharp guy.
Yes, we were fortunate to have a good volunteers. Finding 3 is that our Wilsonville cultural nonprofit organizations are stressed. This is something that a number of city council members and others have indicated anecdotally. And as a former nonprofit executive director and board member, I believe that tax forms or financial information often reveals considerable information about the health of a nonprofit. The city commissioned a firm to conduct a type of forensic examination of IRS Form 990s of 22 Wilsonville nonprofits. And these are primarily nonprofits who focus on Wilsonville. We have a lot of non-Wilsonville nonprofits, meaning like statewide associations and other organizations like the Al-Qaeda Shrine Center, for example, but we didn't look at them. We looked at nonprofits on Wilsonville. The data shows that from 2013 to 2019, half the nonprofits' gross receipts are under $50,000. And 3 of the 13 nonprofits reported overall decreases in revenues, and nearly half of the nonprofits reported overall decreases in net income over 5 years.
Yeah, and followed by the next slide, which is about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also what's going on nationally is cultural nonprofits are stressed beyond belief right now. It's just every day there's another report, there's more findings. So stressed is definitely the word.
Indeed, as our finding 4 found with a recent June 22 survey conducted of 1,600 Oregon nonprofits, half are in real problem and maybe more. 46% may not have operating expenses to the end of the year. So a number of our nonprofits were already stressed, and now COVID-19 has made the situation even worse.
Yeah, I'll just elaborate. You can imagine, just shifting to a digital format for performance organizations, as well as visual organizations. It's tough.
Now, if we look at the public sector, finding 5 is that the city lacks a comprehensive plan for supporting arts, culture, and heritage facilities, programs, and events. And so the council was aware of this and has directed the development of an arts, culture, and heritage strategy. We will note that consistent themes arose from interviews and our public surveys. And I'll let Bill comment on these 2 items.
Yeah, I think actually what I want to mention is that when I came on board to assist with this project, since you started in 2018 with interviews and surveys and group meetings, I kind of expected people to say, well, just didn't we do this? Or, experience some planning fatigue or something. And only one person mentioned that. Meaning we consistently found people noting this lack of city coordination, support, leadership. Did you want me to dig into the I think that's enough, Mark, for me on this one.
Yeah, maybe just comment on the bottom bullet.
Oh, yeah. Of the 15 communities that we surveyed and interviewed were all around the Portland metro area, comparable communities. And only 2 are without an arts and culture or heritage commission. And actually the Tigard is the other one, but they're in the process of starting such a commission or coordinating body. So Wilsonville right now is the only of those 15 that doesn't have such a city commission.
During the course of the survey, we asked residents what was their vision of culture. And the Survey Monkey produced this word cloud of most often cited phrases and quotes.
There's a lot in there. So I just pulled out of our vision survey. A couple of people offered actually visions, and I'm just going to offer these. So Wilsonville is a place where beauty, art, and culture and learning thrive. Our community nurtures individual fulfillment and sense of belonging. And then the other one I thought was interesting was school cultural activities flow into the community. And this was also really interesting because people value the schools, actually they value the city's events and the library highly, but they also really value the school cultural activities, like the Dios de los Muertos Festival, like the International Nights, which I think are at the elementary schools. And they said if the school activities and events could kind of flow out in the community, and the community events sort of flow into the schools, would be a great thing.
also asked the community, what are Wilsonville's cultural attributes or strengths? Again, this is the most often phrases that were cited.
And this was really clear. It was parks, library, schools, existing events. But one thing that doesn't show up here that came through clearly in our group meetings and especially interviews were friendly people. A lot of people said, Wilsonville has friendly people, and we appreciate that. I know that may sound kind of stupid, but it's a good thing.
Then we asked, what are the challenges or barriers to participating in local culture in Wilsonville?
Yeah, and I just looked at this a few minutes ago. I think the three words that pop out also in interviews and everything are lack, opportunities, and place. As we talked about before, people kind of struggle with, like, what is the culture of this place? It doesn't quite have a core, and that we lack cultural opportunities, whether it's a place to see theater, a place to take classes, workshops, go to an exhibition gallery, eating ethnic food, kind of participating in the culture of Wilsonville.
Hit a wrong button there. Sorry, let me get back to where we were. Oh. Shoot. Okay, now I'll find out where we were here. I don't know how I did that. Sorry.
I'm glad you did it, not me, Mark.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Here we go. Okay. All right. Current slide. Okay. Sorry about that. Finding 6 basically is that the primary units of local government coordinate on many issues and projects, and the community members would like to see greater support for cultural activities and programs. And this primarily referred to the city and the school district, and to a lesser degree, Clackamas Community College. It was noted that the city's support for schools' infrastructure and that the schools provide community-wide use of facilities. And as Bill has noted, the schools are viewed as a source of cultural programs.
Yeah, I think I've already commented on this one. This is clear.
Very good. Finding 7, the community seeks public sector leadership to support arts, culture, heritage programs, events, and facilities.
Definitely. Again, very clear.
And that's both through our surveys as well as through the stakeholder interviews over 2 years, a desire for greater leadership by the city, and support for our nonprofits. Regarding public art and the cultural center, our findings indicate that public art is recognized as a significant cultural asset in Wilsonville. This has been demonstrated over time since the 2003 formation of Citizens for Public Art, and subsequently the Wilsonville Arts and Culture Council and the Charbonneau Arts Association. It's also been noted that public art is a tool of creative placemaking, and that's been cited in both the 2019 Town Center Master Plan and the 2018 Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
And this follows this trend of using public art to make stronger, more engaged, lively, authentic places.
We found that substantial community demand exists for an arts and cultural center. And Bill, I'll let you do the rest of this one.
Yeah, and I think this really also is related to this perception of a lack of community core or center or culture. I mean, it's both a place that's asked for to do these things and to fill that opportunity gap, but also I think to bring people together.
And finally, under funding and resources, funding and resource development are crucial for improving nonprofit organizational capacity to do things and to advance arts and cultural programs.
Yeah, I think you're really going to benefit from, in the short term, as you roll out, hopefully, adoption of the plan and implementing what our peers in the 15 communities said. So there's just some strong strong advice there, and actually people to call on, including that making culture, the only way you can really show that culture is a priority is to have a dedicated staff person with dedicated funding. It was also interesting, Mark notes the funding model. I'd say if you had to kind of generalize what our colleagues said, that they said to work toward a funding model with diverse sources, not just a source such as an entertainment tax that Vancouver, Washington was just about ready to pass and went belly up the minute the pandemic hit. But both a robust public-private partnership that definitely has public funding but leverages private support as well.
And then out of this come recommendations in the same areas that we have done our findings. Regarding, in the community context, it's that the City Council adopts this cultural strategy to provide the public sector leadership and coordination to support community arts cultural activities. This would include more active coordination with the Westland Wilson School District, the community college, local nonprofits, and other supporters of arts. We have found there are some businesses and others in the community also interested in supporting arts.
Yeah, and I think I've already spoken to this one. This is key.
What do you want to know about the leadership?
Yeah, that's the one thing I actually was going to mention. That it's kind of interesting. I didn't, of all the people we interviewed and all the public surveys came in, it wasn't like people were asking for a handout, but they just want the city to step forward and feel that if the city does that, then other resources can be mobilized. But someone's got to step forward and show that this is a priority.
Cultural diversity and ethnic inclusivity a priority, which is already a topic much on the council's mind today.
Yeah.
Even a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I've just got to say, I didn't raise this priority. It came from the community, like through everything.
Bill, can you comment on the bottom bullet?
Oh yeah, actually, this came from our colleague at the Chehalem Cultural Center in Newburgh. And that he just said it's way easier to engage minority populations in the planning and build those relationships from the beginning, as opposed to get things up and running and then say, oh, we've got a gap. What are we going to do?
Regarding our cultural nonprofits, recommendation 3 is to provide strategic assistance to Wilsonville nonprofits in order to build their organizational capacity. The analysis of nonprofits that we had commissioned came up with several recommendations. Obviously, small nonprofits could benefit from fund development training, as well as maybe volunteer recruitment. They also suggested consolidating or collaborating, that maybe we have too many nonprofits and each one has overhead. Would it make some sense to consolidate into one nonprofit and have various programs? And finally, there's a desire to have a united fund approach to collaboration and fundraising, so that if we go out together and make our request, it'll be stronger than if we one-off and attempt to do that. So more coordination on fundraising and other activities.
And in our cultural world, we talk about a local cultural ecosystem, and the nonprofits are just, they're an important part of that ecosystem.
For the public sector, their recommendation includes the city forms an Arts and Culture Commission and provides the supporting staffing resource. It'd be noted that an Arts and Culture Commission would be a multidisciplinary body that It impacts multiple city boards and city departments. So the library, park and recreation, the tourism program all have a relationship with arts and culture and vice versa. So we would need coordination amongst our city boards as well as our various city departments. And the thought is that a full-time staff position of tourism and cultural affairs coordinator could help provide that linkage amongst our various departments and volunteer bodies.
Yeah, I think this is clear. I've already chimed in on this one.
Also, to improve intergovernmental collaboration and coordination. And again, this would be where our staff position would be in a position to be able to work more closely with the school district and other bodies to coordinate with our nonprofits and our businesses and to seek collaboration for the performing arts on facility usage. That seems to be one of the issues we're encountering is the performing arts are having a harder time with a facility to provide the public the opportunity to experience performing arts of various types.
Yeah, I mean, for example, there's no place for Wilsonville Stage to perform. No ongoing place or suitable place.
And then related to this is to develop a long-term sustainable public art program, to develop a public art plan, artwork that is thoughtfully commissioned as part of an integrated strategy for how public art and the community relate.
Yeah, and right now, and I do a lot of public art planning work, right now you have a set of individual pieces, but no collection with a vision, and no policies and procedures, I don't think, in terms of the care, the maintenance, the commissioning of new work, the decommissioning of old work, the accepting donations, all of that.
Recommendation 7 is the city works with partners to advance an arts and cultural center / facility. And this is one thing we did find in discussions was that it would need to be flexible. It should grow and change as the needs and demands of the community change over time. Multi-purpose to accommodate a variety of uses for performances, exhibits, lectures, special events and classes, and maybe we should even conduct a facility study how to best utilize existing city facilities that might be able to be utilized.
Yeah, I was really happy with the theme that we heard that make this specific to us, not just what a model of what Sherwood has or Hillsborough has or Beaverton is building or Portland has. And then again, people were sort of modest about their ask, but this sense of flexibility was stressed.
And finally, our last recommendation pertaining to funding is basically to improve and create sustainable funding mechanisms. And the arts and cultural strategy suggests consideration of several different kinds of funding mechanisms. They all might not be acceptable to the council and the community. So what kind of funding mechanisms are acceptable to the community? Bearing in mind that we want a balanced and reliable and diverse funding set of sources so that if one goes down, all the eggs aren't in one basket.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
And basically,
again, the good thing is you have other models of how other communities are doing this. Hillsborough, Beaverton, Newburgh, so forth and so on.
And this would include then coordinating fundraising strategies with the community's cultural nonprofits, engaging businesses, as well as then attempting to leverage grant funds from other organizations such as the Oregon Cultural Trust. Metro has placemaking grants. There's a Metro Community Enhancement Program separate from ours. So there are several other funding sources that we could also look into tapping.
Can I add one more thing, Mark, before you wrap it up? I just want to kind of, did I interrupt you on that one, Mark? Go for it? Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to add this in the very beginning, that it was kind of crazy wonderful that you all went ahead in the pandemic and did this, with this sense of we know that the doors will open again and we want to be ready for that. I think it was a great time to do this because kind of as we talked about that, even though many people weren't really sure, well, what is the culture of Wilsonville? Even actually in 2018, that study, something like, what was it, 70%, 75% of the people surveyed considered local culture important. Anyway, and the last thing I just wanted to say that I've been doing this work for 35 years, and I've never, ever had the city support that I've had on this project. So it's made all the difference in the world. So I appreciate that. And then this gigantic group of people that stepped forward to be on our task force really helped. And for example, just kind of a shout out to Christopher Chitola-Hart and Anjanette Escobar, and also Rebecca Burkeen, who basically, they helped, instrumental to organizing the youth meeting and the Latinx meeting. So I just wanted to give a shout out. And also Reagan Molitor. I just wanted to, and the school district were helpful. So just a shout out before we got to move on.
Actually, that concludes our formal presentation, and I will stop screen sharing now and open it up to City Council questions, comments, remarks, whatever. We're open to hearing what you all like, don't like, or would like to see. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all the work and for the multifaceted presentation here. Lots for us to consider. Council, what would you like to ask or to talk about? Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I was involved in some of this with putting the history part together, but I wanted to ask the city manager question on this with regards to Silverton. So my impression is that Silverton has for a small town, quite a robust arts and culture program or atmosphere. What did you think of that, of what Silverton has versus what Wilsonville has, since you have some experience with Silverton?
Yeah, so I would say on the art side, that is a very robust, because there are a lot of artists that live in the Silverton Mount Angel area, and the city partnered with the Silverton Arts and Heritage Council, and we actually worked with them and gave them a 99-year lease on a house that the city owned in the park, and they were able to leverage that long-term lease and go after several grants from the Oregon Community Foundation, some other folks, to basically bring in a bunch of money to refurbish the one house that they already had the lease with the city on, and then another one that we gave them for children's arts programs that they were looking to do. So there's a long-term relationship between the city and the arts community. There's also a pretty thriving community theater group there called the Brush Prairie, Friends of Brush Prairie. That's a little bit outside of town, but they do have a standalone building that they were able to work with the owners of that property. So there is also a group called Silverton Together, which is essentially a community-led group, but it touches on all the nonprofits in Silverton. All the nonprofits are involved in that, so it's kind of like what you're seeing here in that recommendation. So that's just kind of a broad overview. There is, I don't know if it's because it's a smaller community and there's a need to kind of make sure that you're leveraging resources, but it's very robust. But I think they're struggling with some of the same things that Wilsonville is, in that people kind of time out because they've been involved for so long. So it's like city staff here, when we lose a department head, if we're not looking at succession planning, we're not probably doing the right thing. So I think what we can do as a city is to help build that capacity. I think that's kind of what I'm seeing in some of these recommendations.
my recollection is they have Homer Davenport, right? Homer Davenport Days, is that Silverton?
Yeah, I think that was struggling too, and it kind of, it was sponsored by, I think it was sponsored by Silverton Together, and they had some funding challenges. I think it's still going, but there was a year or two there where it was really scaled back quite a bit. Rotary used to run that, and then it kind of got out of it because it was a money loser, so, but it's still going, but I'm not sure to what extent, not as robust as it once was.
Yeah, kind of like us in Boone's Ferry days, probably.
Right.
Anyway, I know lots of little towns are able to do pretty amazing things, and certainly Newburgh has really taken off with the Chehalem Cultural Center, and that before the pandemic, that place was full of activities pretty much constantly, of all sorts, history and arts and classes and everything. So I haven't given up on us yet, but we'll keep working at it.
I think there's some really encouraging recommendations in here that we can work with.
There are comments, perspectives. Councilor Linville.
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with Bill and Mark and the committee on some portions as a liaison from the council. And I just was very, very impressed with the enthusiasm and I think that although a large group, I think as Bill kind of characterized, I don't believe that they came forward with a grandiose set of recommendations. I think they're reasonable and hopefully things that will give us a large enough menu that I think we can, as a council, look at what fits best for our community. So thank you both.
Other discussion? Councilor President Ackervall.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. There's a lot in this draft and lots of information to absorb, and I appreciate so much you walking us through it tonight. And I appreciate very much the volunteers that put a lot of effort and time and thought and care into the responses and the work that led to this point. I was glad to see some of the recommendations coming out of this, specifically recommendation 2 about making cultural diversity and ethnic inclusivity a priority for the city. I think that's important, and I'm glad to see that now in the foundation of this work. Another comment, I think that I was at one point in the text here, and I'm not sure if you used the phrase in the presentation, but I highlighted it when I was looking through the text, and that was in this discussion about, you know, where is Wilsonville's core, or, you know, having the centralized place. But there was a description where it was articulated that Wilsonville has nodes, N-O-D-E-S, nodes. And I liked that, that description. I guess it just kind of resonated with me and it made sense. We do have nodes within our city. While we might not have a central, you know, defined place, we do have nodes, and so I think that there's opportunity in those nodes. And there's also challenge, and so I guess I appreciated how that was described in the plan, and even the historical background that went into this, kind of explaining how Wilsonville developed over time, and you know, when the different retail areas move from place to place, and that how that has affected kind of the overall feel of the city as well. So those pieces of the plan I felt were important for kind of the understanding of what our environment is and what the challenges and what the possibilities are for the city. I wondered if you could talk, and perhaps Bill Fleck, maybe you could talk a little about, in your experience with this work, in the recommendation 3, there was a bullet talking about consolidating or collaborating of the kind of different entities that are in play here. And I wonder if you could describe what you have seen over time, how that works, how it works so it's beneficial to everyone, because it sounds like it could be a bit of a delicate thing too. And what is the city's role in that, or how does this potentially play out in helpful and positive ways? Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, and then I think Mark would want to chime in as well here, since he commissioned the other firm to do this analysis of the 990s, and this primarily came from them. But it just makes it's sort of common sense to me that when you have struggling nonprofits, that, well, my rule of collaboration is 1 + 1 = 3. That you can do more in collaboration than any two groups can do alone. It's also more expensive. It's often it's more time consuming. It takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm. The reality is you can do more. You can achieve more. So I think that's underlying this, as well as what you were getting at about, I forget, it was the city manager, who I can't see here, who talked about building infrastructure. And Mark and I, in our words, didn't really hit that, but that's super, super key here. And the nonprofits, I know I'm generalizing here, but as Councilor Leon talked about, are struggling with, or someone mentioned, sort of the graying of the board members. So, and the volunteers. So somehow we've got to figure out how to build that capacity. So consolidation is one option. And it is a word that can sort of strike fear in the hearts of nonprofits, like, oh my God, they're going to make us merge. Mm-hmm. But it's just an option. Mark, do you want to?
Sure. Any of these things would have to happen with community collaboration. So it isn't like the city just says, and it shall be, these are all independent organizations, and so we need to bring everybody on board and let the logic of the moment and the time, dictate what we do. If all of a sudden everybody's finances are a lot better, then hey, keep going the way you're going. But right now, it's showing decline, and so we need to consider new options. And again, it wouldn't be the city imposing this. This would be in collaboration with the nonprofits to see what makes the most sense.
So is this like the city facilitating a meeting where the subject is brought up, or like how does that look?
Can I chime in there, Mark?
Yeah, please.
So the essential piece of this is training and technical assistance. Mm-hmm. Yet another reason to have a dedicated city staff person that can coordinate this, to begin building this infrastructure. So it's not a quick fix. Capacity development, never is. Yeah, Mark?
I'll give an example. Several years ago, the city helped form the Korean War Memorial Foundation of Oregon to help take over from the Korean War Veterans Association maintenance of the Oregon Korean War Memorial in Town Center Park. The Korean War Memorial Foundation was having some problems initially trying to focus on what to do and how to do it. So the city actually commissioned the Nonprofit Association for a day to do a training session for the Korean War Memorial Foundation that had great benefits that helped them to focus, realize what they should do and the order that they should do it in. So this is the kind of thing that the city could help bring the nonprofit association and other expertise to these groups and have collaborative meetings and opportunities. So there's a whole spectrum of opportunities for coordination and education that the city could help facilitate.
I see. And the education, the training component is key in there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to need to move forward here soon, so we need to understand as a council what the next step would be or next steps would be to move forward effectively. I kind of, in my own mind, find the crux of it in recommendation 4 about the staff position and the creation of a commission, and it seems to me, from my current understanding anyway, that creation of that staff position and of the commission would then give us a framework with which to implement a lot of the other recommendations. I'm sure that's not the only way to do it, but what does staff think about next steps? A formal adoption of this, should the council choose to go that way, or what is your thinking?
Yes, Mayor and City Council members, this would be similar to the economic development strategy that we did several years ago and the tourism development strategy of 2014, where basically the city adopts a roadmap. A strategy is not a detailed blueprint master plan, but it's a roadmap for how to proceed. And so we would ask that you would adopt this strategy next month, and then that would set the stage for staff to bring back to you a resolution creating the Arts and Culture Commission and other components of a cultural affairs program. This is similar, like I said, what we did with the tourism strategy, where you first adopt strategy, then we talked with the various tourism parties about what made sense. Do we form our own destination marketing organization, or do we form a committee at the city? Well, it was agreed that a committee at the city would be the better route, and then the city council adopted a resolution creating the tourism promotion committee. So it would be very similar to that process.
Okay. So if council is generally in agreement with a kind of a thumbs up that this is the right direction, you'll bring this back to us here next month, is what it sounds like?
Yes, and if you have any additional comments over the next day, we would love to be able to take those in. You can send me an email, and I'll be happy to. We're taking public comments all the way through tomorrow, so we're going to take all the additional comments and look at how we can put those as appropriate into the strategy.
Right. Is it the general perception of council that this is the direction we want staff to proceed? Councilor West, you haven't spoken before.
Yeah, quick question. Is the tourism committee fully supportive of this plan and hiring a staff person? And where does the tourism committee kind of feel about these ideas?
We had one of the tourism promotion committee members, Rohit Sharma, the owner of the new Hilton Garden Inn, participated in the Arts, Culture, Heritage Strategy Task Force. We did have a tourism promotion committee meeting was it this week actually, and Rohit indicated strong support for that. The committee as a whole is fine to have somebody promote arts and culture in town. They don't view it as necessarily their priority to do, but arts and culture will just make Wilsonville better for visitors. The promotion committee would love to have dedicated staffing. They've been happy with my schlocky job, and Zoe has been helping out tremendously much better. But she also has a full-time position as assistant to the city manager. So the committee kind of likes the idea, I believe, of having a full-time staff person who's dedicated to cultural and tourism type affairs.
Okay. Are people generally thumbs up on this approach? Are we ready for them to go the next step? What are people thinking? Nods? Some indication? Yeah, I'm seeing mostly.
One thing I would like going forward is you mentioned in the report 10 or 11 arts and culture nonprofits that we have. Is there a list of them there? Do we know who they are?
Yes.
It would be good to have that list and dig a little deeper on each one for what their needs are, because they vary a lot. And one of them is, like performing arts has a need for a place, but to do something, to do performances, but they have large storage needs also, as does the Historical Society, which doesn't have a performing kind of need, but has very specialized storage because of the nature of those archives. And an art group probably has not very much storage need. So when we're looking at a facility or what exactly we're trying to provide or do, which ones kind of fit together in the puzzle and which don't, or it's hard for me to know. I mean, I can tell you the Historical Society pretty much what its needs are, and it currently has a lot of support because our stuff is archived in the attic of the library. But I don't know what the immediate needs are of all these other 10 groups. So that would be a nice thing to know going forward before we decide here's a building and here's a person, and we never really looked at what the specific needs in terms of those things are.
Yes, that certainly would make a considerable amount of sense. You can actually find the list of all the nonprofits examined in Appendix H.
Appendix, yeah.
Cultural Heritage Strategy. And your point is absolutely right on, Councilor Lehan, that indeed each of the cultural nonprofits will have a different need. And so indeed the proposed coordinator will be in a position to help gauge what those needs are and maybe how the city may be of assistance.
Do an assessment of where the greatest needs are, for what.
For what? Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm seeing agreement pretty much across the board on moving this forward, and if it can come back to council soon with a formal approval process, I think that we will have the basis to move forward then.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bill. The other item that we have on work session here, where you may be shorting a little bit, I don't want to lose it because I think it's also critical, and that is with regard to the WIN program, which we had asked Mr. Vance to come present to us if he is available, and I hope we have enough time for him here. We were going to end a little early, but maybe we'll go right to our regular deadline. Good evening, sir.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight, Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, and I'm here tonight with joined by, via Zoom, our project consultant, Nick Popanook of Tiberius Solutions, to present the final Wilsonville Investment Now, or WIN, program proposal for adoption by Resolution 2856. Nick, are you able to share your screen for the presentation?
I hope so. Let's click the button here and see how it works out. All right, was that a success?
Perfect, we can see it.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you could advance to slide 2.
Start. There we go.
All right, thank you. So quick history of the TIF zones in Wilsonville. In 2013, the Wilsonville City Council approved the designation of 6 separate properties as individual urban renewal districts. Each of these properties were referred to as a tax increment financing, or TIF zone. The TIF zones use the same funding mechanism as standard urban renewal districts. However, rather than fund large-scale, long-term projects, the TIF zones were intended to provide property tax rebates as a development incentive for qualifying companies who invest in any of the 6 properties. Ultimately, none of the development that occurred within the TIF zones met the eligibility thresholds established for the program, and the existing TIF zone incentive program expired in November 2019. The original approach to TIF zones had limitations as an economic development tool for a couple of reasons. One, it required identifying a handful of specific sites in advance. Therefore, it was not applicable to the vast majority of potential development sites in the city. Second, the thresholds for qualifying development were rigid and did not allow flexibility to accommodate a wider range of potential businesses. And third, each site required the adoption of an urban renewal plan. Those plans have annual administrative requirements and also require consultation with affected taxing districts to renew or extend the plans when they reach their scheduled termination dates. We were given direction from council in 2019 to pursue modifications to the TIF zone program. The city's urban renewal task force met on July 22nd, 2020 to discuss the WIN proposal and provided unanimous feedback that it was a good direction to take. The group, which includes impacted taxing districts and private sector partners, concluded that the program will make the city more competitive with business recruitment, expansion, and retention efforts. We even had explicit comments from some of the taxing districts saying they thought this was a responsible and innovative use of TIF funds during that meeting. The key recommendation from the group was to incorporate additional factors into the WIN program, including diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI considerations, and local business expansion. We took the URA task force feedback back to council on September 10th and were given direction to incorporate the key recommendations into the final proposal, which we're sharing tonight. Next slide. So I wanted to share a couple important reminders to keep top of mind as we review the final program proposal in a couple minutes here with Nick. One, this is a modification to the TIF zone program, not a net new program. The criteria and rules are different, but the underlying concept is exactly the same, which is to use urban renewal tax rebates to incent business investment. Second, tonight's action is only to adopt administrative rules, not an urban renewal zone or a qualifying project. The adoption of the rules will create a valuable economic development tool for staff in marketing Wilsonville to prospective developers and businesses, especially during these very uncertain economic times. The first question I consistently get from businesses is about incentives. So this will give us a very innovative and fresh local program to talk about. Third, we won't be looking at adopting any site-specific urban renewal areas until a qualifying project comes in the door, at which time there will be a 4-month process including a public hearing and citywide notification to approve the plan. I'll now turn it over to Nick to walk us through the key components of the WIN program.
Thanks, Jordan. And I think given the time that we're at right now, and the fact that this is also on agenda for the regular city council meeting later this evening for an actual vote on the resolution, I'm going to try and skip through most of these slides as quickly as possible here during work session, focusing on specific items that I know were raised by city council in the past, questions that have come up, and answers that we have for you on those points, and hopefully save more time for city council to have more questions and answers and discussion in this work session. So everything here, the key elements of the WIN program, the eligibility criteria, the tiers of benefits, all of this should be refresher information that we've brought to you in the past. Most of this, or the core components of this, are all from the original TIF zones program, and the new pieces are looking at DEI and providing additional points for years of operation in Wilsonville. And then the new key element of having 2 tiers of benefits, again, that's different from the original TIF program, but something that we've been discussing for many months on this particular iteration of the WIN program. When we are looking at the benefits for qualifying businesses, Again, this is a rebate of TIF revenue. It's not an abatement, so they do have to pay the taxes up front. One key thing that there's been some discussion on today that we wanted to make perfectly clear is that this program, as it's designed, would rebate 100% of the TIF revenue that's generated by the new investment. Now, TIF revenue only includes permanent rate levies, not local option levies or general obligation bonds. It depends on which tax code area you're in, and the city of Wilsonville overlaps about 30 different tax code areas. But in general, the portion of a total tax bill that is subject to urban renewal for these new permanent rate plans is roughly 2/3. So about 2/3 of the taxes paid by the developer would wind up going to the urban renewal area and come back as a rebate, with another third going for general obligation bonds and local option levies that would not be impacted by urban renewal. This is somewhat different from the original TIF zones program, in which only 75% of the increment was rebated to the developers and 25% was voluntarily shared with overlapping taxing districts. However, 10 years ago or so, when the original TIF program was first envisioned, the urban renewal tax rates were a bit different, and there were roughly $2 to $3 worth of old general obligation bond levies that were still included in the urban renewal tax rate. So back then, a greater share of overall taxes were collected in increment, and so it made more sense to share a portion of that with the overlapping taxing districts early. As we put this program together, the reason we went with 100% of the increment going to the rebate was simply because the change in tax rate and urban renewal over time means that the incentive has already been watered down somewhat when you compare it to other statewide programs like the enterprise zone, where you do have 100% of taxes paid going directly back to these entities in terms of abatement. And then again, this program, in terms of the benefits that are offered, there's 2 tiers, partial incentives and full incentives that range for 4 years and 7 years. The time periods that are included in the program are intended to result in a similar total level of rebate as a property that is participating in the state enterprise zone program. So the state program is for 3 to 5 years. This is for 4 to 7. But because, again, we're only rebating the portion of revenue that comes through TIF, it takes longer to achieve the same amount of benefit. The scoring system, so we've talked a lot in the past with council about the broad strokes. This slide shows the nitty-gritty details. So how many points for capital investment and for new employment based on salaries? And what about these extra credit provisions where we reward businesses that are expanding and have been located in the city of Wilsonville already for a number of years? And how many points are awarded for achieving criteria for diversity, equity, and inclusion? So this slide goes over all of those nitty-gritty details. We are going to, in just another couple of slides, show a few examples of hypothetical businesses and how they would qualify or not qualify for the incentive. One key point is that the bulk of the scores to qualify still need to come from the top 2 criteria, capital investment and new employment. And that new employment generally provides significant points only at higher wage levels, and in particular provides no points at all if those wages are below the county average. When we look at our other 2 criteria here, local business tenure and DEI, each of them provides points, but those points are capped at 4. So for each category, so 8 total. So while it's enough to tip the scales from being partial benefit to full or no benefit to partial, a company still needs to provide a large amount of capital investment or a large amount of jobs at high wages in order to qualify for the program. In terms of the actual thresholds, as we go through that scoring system, a company with less than 60 points does not have any benefits. Between 60 and 79 points is partial benefits, the 4 years of abatement, or pardon me, of rebate. And then 80 points or more gets the full benefits, 7 years of rebate. So for the application itself, we're just going to quickly jump into a few examples because I know we actually haven't had a chance with council before to go over any specific numbers. Where is the right spreadsheet? Here we go. So this is the application form. The application is intended to be as straightforward as possible. So it's just a 2-page form. The developers, when they are applying for it, would only fill in the information that's highlighted in blue. The key things that we're looking at here, again, are the amount of investment, the number of jobs, the wages of those jobs, how many years the company has been in business in Wilsonville, and then whether or not it is qualifying for the DEI requirements. What we have in here right now are examples for one potential developer that has been speaking with the city about a biosciences investment in the city. And it's looking at an investment of roughly $20 million and bringing 150 jobs at an average wage of $70,000 per employee. So when we look at how that adds up, this wage level is between 125% and 150% of the county average wage. So that gets 0.4 points per job. And again, all of this is automated in the spreadsheet. And we showed previously that there is 1 point for every $500,000 of capital investment. And that results down here in 40 points for the capital investment, 60 points for the jobs and wages. This is a new business, so it does not receive any bonus points for being an expansion of an existing business in Wilsonville. And at this point in time, we've assumed no additional points for DEI criteria. All told, though, this company still has a total score of 100 points. So this type of investment is well above the minimum qualifying threshold for the program, due in large part to its very healthy amount of employees and the $20 million of investment. So that is one hypothetical scenario that we have here. Maybe I would just ask council right now whether this is enough of an overview of how the application works, or whether there are folks on council who would like to see examples of other scenarios that might qualify for only partial benefits or no benefits. I just want to be conscious of the time we have.
So, council, are you comfortable with this explanation, or do you want to see more detail about hypothetical application? And I don't have everybody's picture in here along with the screen, so I'm not sure I'm seeing everybody. Anybody with a question? Councilor Linville?
I just have one question, either Nick or Jordan. Would an application, I know that we have a maximum percentage of acreage that can be utilized for any urban renewal funds, and this new program would fall into that calculation. If the project itself, although the numbers might add up to 100% or funding at any level, if it exceeded the acreage required or that was available, would it never show up? Would it never would come to council? How would that be handled?
Yeah, so we will have in a couple of slides here additional information on that point, the process for application, and it does include a meeting with staff to go over the application and ensure that they do qualify. And if there was no longer enough acreage, that would certainly be caught at that point in time, and it either would not move forward or the city would have to make additional changes, removing property from existing urban renewal areas or waiting for an existing urban renewal area to close down before moving forward there.
And right now we have.
I know that was not your question about the calculation of the eligibility, but thank you for letting me ask it.
And Councilor Linville, Nick will touch on this, but right now we have capacity for 143 acres of projects before we hit our capacity for urban renewal in the city. Nick, real quick, would you be able to show the council the second spreadsheet that shows the impact to the taxing districts from the biosciences project?
Yep, So I think that is now back up on screen here. I am not sure exactly what tax code area that project would be located in. And so there are some small differences from different parts of the city. But looking at a typical tax code area for the city, we're looking at $20 million of new investment. The change property ratio today means that that would result in $12.7 million of assessed value coming on the tax rolls. That amount of assessed value, given the tax rate in this area, which is $19 per thousand, would result in almost $250,000, looking at $241,000 of taxes generated each year. But again, a good chunk of those taxes are for bonds and local option levies, and so which are not subject to urban renewal. So urban renewal would collect $164,000 of that. Now, a small portion of that as well would actually be taken out for administrative costs. We haven't gone into the fine details on how that would work yet, but in essence, we'd be looking at a $164,000 rebate in the first year. I say first year and don't focus on how much revenue would be generated in total over a 7-year period, because this type of employment development is going to behave differently than typical residential or commercial development. Rather than all of it appreciating at a consistent 3% growth per year, it is likely that the new structures built would appreciate at 3% per year, but that if there were machinery and equipment value that was part of this initial $20 million investment, that it might depreciate over time. And so every individual property is going to have its own mix of appreciation and depreciation over time. And given the hypothetical examples we're dealing with right now, we don't have enough information to say what it would look like over a period of 7 years. I will point out that based on conversations that Jordan and I had with Councilor Linville in the last few weeks here, we did include language in the administrative rules to make it more clear that if there's a property ever that applies to this program and they're getting almost all of their points from a huge amount of investment, but it's investment in machinery and equipment that is just going to depreciate over time. So by the time the rebate is up, there is no more tangible benefit to the other taxing districts or to the community at large, that is not consistent with the goals of this program. And so that is clearly stated in the administrative rules now to provide City Council with that guidance should that situation come up. One more small point on this particular breakout of the taxes on a property with $20 million of investment. We talk about the portion paid to urban renewal and the portion that it goes to the other taxing districts as normal. A few of the key taxing districts that do have local option levies and would see some benefit right out of the gates in year one includes Clackamas County Public Safety Levy. So this particular property would be paying $3,000 a year to that. Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue has a local option levy, $5,700 a year for that. And then also the Westland Wilsonville School District local option levy, $19,000 a year for that. And that is money that goes directly into the local school district rather than being watered down through the state school fund. So those are some key points there. So if we are looking at getting back to our final slideshow here, another question that came up at the last time we were speaking with City Council was about the benefits of this program in Coffee Creek and whether the two could coexist. In your packet, there is a very brief, I think maybe 2-page memo that examines this issue. The very short answer is that you can't have a property be within 2 urban renewal areas at the same time, but there are still different approaches that could achieve the same sort of goal. One would be that you could remove property from the Coffee Creek urban renewal area before development occurs and put it into a new site-specific wind program urban renewal area. Another approach would be to leave all the property in Coffee Creek, but amend the Coffee Creek plan to add another project description, an eligible expenditure, to say that those funds could be spent to reimburse private sector development that takes place in the area. That first approach of removing property from Coffee Creek to put it into a new site-specific urban renewal area would have a very negative impact on the TIF revenue and the ability to fund infrastructure in the area. The second approach of amending the plan to just allow this as an expenditure, it would still have that impact. Anytime you are choosing to spend money in this urban renewal area on something other than what was originally identified in the list of projects, that does mean that you're cutting funding from that list of projects. But in theory, you could set this up in such a way that it would have a lesser impact. Maybe you cap it at 4 years. Maybe you only cap it, or you don't make the entire tax amount rebate eligible, but their pre-development costs and site readiness costs become rebate eligible. So there are different approaches that could be taken. They do have trade-offs in terms of using up the maximum indebtedness or extending the lifetime of the district, how that changes the timing and funding for other major infrastructure projects in the area. The recommendation from staff at this point in time is to keep the two programs separate, but recognize that there is definitely the possibility to have ongoing conversations about how the Coffee Creek urban renewal area can best incentivize economic development within its boundaries. And one possible approach to that is looking at including a project description for property tax rebates to private developers.
Nick, would you mind touching on the, oh, go ahead.
Yep, I think I missed this one slide here on the program application. So what would actually happen going forward? And Jordan, this was the point that you brought up earlier, where currently the city has capacity for 143 acres to take advantage of this program. However, both the year 2000 plan and the West Side plan are on, excuse me, both of these older urban renewal plans are on the cusp of closing down. When they do close down in a couple of years, the city will have roughly 1,000 acres of capacity for urban renewal. That is far and away beyond what we are anticipating would be needed for the site-specific program, WIN program that we're looking at right now. And then as the overall sort of process for application, once an applicant submits the form that we went over in Excel, the city would meet with them for a pre-authorization conference to make sure that this is a real investment, confirm the assumptions that the developer has entered, make sure everybody understands the timeline and the commitments that need to go into this program. The city staff would then create an urban renewal plan for adoption. At the same time, city staff will be working on a legal agreement, a development agreement, so that the city and the developer both stipulate what they need to do in accordance with this program. And then that urban renewal plan, as Jordan said earlier, would have a multi-month process. Looks like about a 4-month process, given how quickly you can do things according to statutes that govern urban renewal in the state of Oregon. And that would include a public hearing, it would include citywide notice, and it would include the requirement to consult and confer with all the overlapping taxing districts. One additional point not on this slide is that this process does also include a hearing at Planning Commission, and we have talked about this with staff over the last week and the need to be in front of Planning Commission in the next few weeks or months here, just to give them a heads up on this program, make sure they understand what it entails and what their role in the program would be if City Council does in fact adopt a resolution later tonight to implement the program. So Jordan, I think that's what I had. I'll turn it over to you here for the final few slides and then for council discussion.
Great, thank you, Nick. I'll just close this out here. So in summary, we're very excited about this program. We think it'll provide a vital economic development tool for staff, and it will distinguish Wilsonville as a business-friendly city. It will build on our history here of innovation in the Wilsonville way. It's the first of its kind in Oregon, and we've had communities from around the state contact us to learn about what we're doing and how they might replicate this in their jurisdictions. We're very proud of our work, and we thank council for your critical help in shaping the policy proposal and giving us direction to pursue it. So with that, this concludes our presentation, and now I can now turn it over to council for discussion and the recommended next step of adopting administrative rules by resolution 2856 later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, both very much. It strikes me as interesting how our work that was also very innovative at its time came in the midst of the 2008, 9, 10 downturn when we were grappling with a lot of lack of business energy and empty buildings in Wilsonville. And it didn't play out quite like we had hoped, but I think that we did both learn something and we derived some advantage from the innovation and the buzz that it kind of created around the region. We find ourselves now in another downturn, and we have not experienced the level of vacancy, and we hope not to, of course. But by being innovative, I'm very much anxious to see this program in action and hope that it might bear fruit, especially when we're talking about the kinds of numbers for investment in our community and jobs in our community that we're really trying to incentivize. So enough of that speech. Council, questions? Anybody like to know something more before we get to this topic on our meeting tonight? Councilor Linville.
Well, I guess my question is about administration of the program, because it's possible, I mean, with our current districts that we have right now, they're large and they're few. And so administering them and keeping track of them over time appears to be a simpler process than might be the case with multiple smaller WIN projects that may be coming and going at very, very different times. And so it just seems to me that, I mean, it's probably not an insurmountable problem, but obviously more of an administrative task than our current program. So I don't know if you have any comments about that. I'd like to hear your analysis.
Yeah, I would say we might want to send a fruit basket to the county assessor as a thank you. I think a lot of the administrative burden would fall to the county assessor. They're the ones that are going to be doing the calculations every year to determine how much assessed value is in each of these areas, what the amount of TIF revenue is that does come back to the city or to the urban renewal area. They'll keep each of the separate TIF zones separate and distinct, and they will let us know how much money belongs to each of those TIF zones. So they do a lot of the hard work, a lot of the math work. From the city's perspective, it really is verifying the annual compliance with the program, and we have tried to choose requirements that are fairly easy to confirm the annual compliance. And then there's going to be just regular administrative requirements of the Urban Renewal Agency. But fortunately, that is one agency. So even if you did have 3 or 4 of these WIN program zones operating at the same time, you wouldn't need to have a separate budget hearing for each one of them and a separate audit for each one of them. They are all part of the same Urban Renewal Agency. And so that does have some economies of scale there.
And then I just had one additional, just a point that I wanted to make with the rest of the council, and that was on page 4 of the administrative rules. It's page 261 of our packet, and this is what Nick was talking about. This was my concern. It's the second paragraph under Plan Adoption 5.5. And my concern was that if we had multiple, especially with the incentivizing current businesses in our community, that it might put the council and the business community in a bit of a contentious relationship if the council was to have to pick and choose which projects might be funded or might be accepted and which ones would not. And my concern was that we have somewhere in our administrative rules that gives some guidance to the council about how we would prioritize the decisions of adopting those plans. And so I just wanted to draw attention to the council that the guidance would be that we would be able to prioritize projects that contribute to the long-term growth in the property tax base, and not so heavily weighted on equipment. And it doesn't mean we have to. It just gives us some option to looking at that in terms of making a decision. So thank you for putting that in.
Anybody else? All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, and we are really at the end of our time here for work session tonight. So thank you for the work that has gone into this. Council will have a chance to discuss a little further or provide our individual perspectives when we get into this topic at the formal meeting here to follow. So if you have things in mind for that, just hold them in mind, and we can have the discussion then. All right, thank you very much for that. Mr. Cosgrove, anything else we need to do on work session here?
Nope, we just need 5 minutes. Remember to tip your waiter.
All right, I'm going to call us out of work session at 6:59, and we'll ask people to come back in 5, and we'll jump into our regular meeting. Thanks very much.
5 minutes.